Hey, it's Tim here. In today's video, we're doing a very different kind of video. We're going to be looking at something called the Tableau UI Kit. This is a prototyping tool for helping you plan your Tableau dashboards. And I'm going to let Robert explain the whole capability of this tool himself, but I think it's an important aspect of Tableau dashboarding that just doesn't get much coverage. And I also think a lot of people are sleeping on this tool. Now, Robert hasn't sponsored me for this video. This is just a straight discussion with me and him talking about the benefits of prototyping, but also the way the UI kit works and how you can actually use it for more than just Tableau. As ever, I hope you enjoyed this video and let's get stuck in. But yeah, we can get started right away and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Robert Janezic. I'm a product designer working in the Tableau Center of Excellence at JP Morgan Chase. So that basically means that I design websites and applications for our 150,000 plus user Tableau base. And so at that scale, we need to start, creating applications and things that help our user base. So it's my responsibility to design, those websites and applications. So that's generally what my responsibilities are.
What about the product? Tableau UI Kit.
The product, yeah, Tableau UI Kit. So the Tableau UI Kit is, how familiar are you with UI kits in general before the Tableau UI Kit?
So I'm fairly familiar with them. I've done a bit of web design way back when. I used to use UI kits when I looked at things like Bootstrap, which Twitter developed to help people build websites. I've also used them to look at interface design. So that's sort of my background. But for the benefit of everyone who's probably watching and has never had to do that, maybe just explain a bit about what they are.
Yeah. So I would say most of the people in the analytics world, I'm not saying that the Tableau UI Kit was their first introduction, but it could have been. I'd say it's probably a good likelihood that it was for them and their team. So UI kits are a set of components and styles that help designers build websites and applications faster.
Right.
So for example, if you went to like Gumroad or something, or one of those websites, or you just went to the Figma community and you looked up UI kit, you would see hundreds or maybe even thousands of different UI kits.
Right.
So it's basically a way to, build things faster. And the thing is, people have different opinions about the way certain components and styles should look.
Right.
So some of them are really opinionated, right? So that means that they have a very specific style that they're going for in the UI kit if you want to build a website in that general style.
Right.
And then some of them aren't opinionated, where they're just like super base like component, where it's just a button, but we're not getting too crazy on the button. It's just like the most base version of it. And it's kind of up to you to change the style. So there's a lot of different kits. And so the Tableau UI Kit is, it's all of those things that I mentioned, but it's for Tableau specifically. Right. So it helps you prototype and design Tableau dashboards before you actually start developing the Tableau dashboard inside of Tableau.
Amazing. Might it be a good idea to just show people? Then we can get into the semantics of how you got there, how you came up with the product, the stuff that people really want to know, but it probably helps to show people what it is.
So when you first open the UI kit, you're just going to see a bunch of, instructions and things to get you started. Right. What is this? What, vendor am I using to purchase? I'm using Lemon Squeezy. I just recently switched from Gumroad for some fee reasons. And then we have like general info, styles, components, and all these things. And I'm not going to, talk about all of these in depth, but, anyone can come in here. And they can.
It's really well documented.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that everything is well documented and it's easy to understand and things like that.
Compared to most Figma UI kits, this is
Yeah,
like top tier documentation.
wanted to really make sure everything was good. And then we
Good.
jump into examples, and for version 2.0, my last version, I did have examples, but I don't think I spent enough time on them. And I really wanted to make sure that the examples that were here really showed what you could do with the kit. And it's not like I'm saying, if you have the UI kit, you'll be able to design a dashboard like this in 30 seconds. It does take design knowledge to understand how to create something like this, but a lot of the components that I've built into the UI kit help you get further along. Like, for example, if you're not familiar with application design and you're just kind of familiar with the way you kind of see in the Tableau community, you might not really know what, the best practices of navigation are, or like how most application, designers would usually do a sidebar, or how would they do a top nav bar. And so I spent a lot of time really focusing on making sure that the dashboard components that you could have, like, just a sidebar or something like this, is very similar to what you would see if you decided to sign up for some sort of application, and you would see something similar to this, right? It's using all the same contrast, all the spacing's correct, and things like that. So it is opinionated in that way.
Has an opinion.
Yeah, I did provide an opinion about what I think good application design is, and although this is for Tableau, it's kind of the same, although it's a little bit harder to do it in Tableau. You kind of have to do hacking stuff. But I wanted to make sure that everything was, well designed, essentially.
There's some parameters that you've kind of set in, but also just going back to a couple of the things you said, that first point you made about thinking about an application, it's actually a really pertinent point, because a lot of the time people are asked to make dashboards that should be applications. They should have that level of sort of consideration and thought, because we always hear about, analytics leaders calling their analytics solutions products, right? So if those things are products, they should be treated as such. And actually an application sort of mindset gives you a better framework to making sure you build things in a standard way across a whole team. But also this sort of second point you touched on, which is guide rails, not sort of limiting you to just Tableau, because in the real world, you might also be embedding, let's say, Tableau inside of another platform, in which case some of what you're showing is actually possible if you take sort of the Tableau Chrome out of the way and you put your own sort of finish to it. So I think this is very applicable, and it also makes people think about, actually, should we do this somewhere else? Or could we prototype it in Tableau and then build it elsewhere? That's sort of all part of the conversation. And this tool kind of brings you into that world with Tableau at its heart, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I like exactly what you just said. It brings you into that world, right? Where most Tableau developers aren't familiar with designing an application. So, for example, if a Tableau developer was tasked with, hey, we need to create this financial application, and I need you to be the user interface designer, and I need you to create this application design from scratch. Would you know how to do it? And I would say for most Tableau developers, the answer is no, because in general, historically, Tableau design is definitely different from application design. So, for example, if you went to the Figma community right now and you looked up dashboard, you're not going to see Tableau dashboards. You're going to see like application dashboards, and they're designed a lot differently. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One, you can literally do anything in code. So, the things that you're designing, they can actually, build. And two is there's just not as much design experience in the Figma or in the Tableau community, but that makes sense, right? Like they're not designers, right? They're, analysts.
Exactly.
I'm not expecting someone that spends 95% of their day in Tableau and and doing SQL and doing data analytics stuff to be like top tier designers. Like I'm not expecting them
Yeah,
to
it's a completely
post.
different
It's
skill.
unrealistic, right?
Yeah.
So for someone that is in Figma 95% of my day, and that's whose job it is to do those things, I feel like I can help people like get a really good base
100%.
with a lot of those things by creating these opinionated components essentially.
Yeah.
And it's not like I have all of these dashboards built in Tableau. It's kind of up to the person, you know, to take these and be like, hey, I don't know how to, oh, for example, like this small thing right here. I don't necessarily know how to do this rounded corner thing in Tableau.
Yeah.
Let me just implement it how I would implement it in Tableau.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I do feel like it's my responsibility to give the best version of what it could be. And then you decide whether or not you want to spend the time implementing it inside of Tableau.
In a way, you've sort of harnessed the UI application expertise and turned it into an aspiration for people who build dashboards. Because I always think that I might get cancelled for saying this, but I always think Tableau dashboard design tends to track about 4 years behind actual design trends. So, and that's not because of the users, it's because Tableau itself haven't done enough work to bring through modern design trends in other design sort of capabilities into the product. And so we're limited mostly actually by the tool.
And there's a lot of things, there's a lot of features that Tableau could add that could really help people not only design faster,
right,
but also be able to design at a higher level, right? So like if Tableau, I know this has been a feature request forever where, you know, you can set all of your defaults up front, right?
Templates.
That'd be great. You could create something.
Please.
You could create something in Tableau. Like let's say you have a really cool KPI and then use the same functionality that Figma does, which is componentizing. You componentize that KPI and then you can easily just drag that in next time and you can, you know, populate it quickly. These are all things that would really help people. I can't imagine those would be implemented anytime soon. But if I can help in any way, you know, that's kind of
exactly. On that last point, I thought metrics were exactly that. When I saw metrics, I was like, yes, let me put this in a dashboard, and it's never happened. It's so frustrating. But absolutely, like if we go back to a UI kit, I think the opinions you've sort of built into this are actually quite well grounded, but also might expose people to it's like a shortcut to a form of structure that people haven't really thought through. Like if you zoom out and you look at everything you've done, there's quite clearly a style guide. There's quite clearly like a format, and everything looks like it's come out of the same sort of house or organization. There is also a consistent use of things like font and color, and you know, the red amber indicators are all, you know, well applied. You're flipping through these as I speak, so you've done a lot of work actually to really apply the thought. So what I was going to suggest next is like just show us what it can do. Show us how someone would use this, and
so I think it'd be good if so I'll just do a new page. Actually, this is the actual version that people see, so I probably don't want to do it in here.
Don't do it on the production version. I've done that before, and
because they would actually be able to see that. Like if they were in it on the if they went from the website, then they could actually see it. So the concept of a UI kit and why Figma is so cool is that you create a kit, you create your components, you have your styles that you want to use, you publish that library, you publish the library, and then anyone that has access to that library can open any new Figma file, be able to enable the library, and then pull in the components they want. So for example, if I went to assets here and I looked up the different you know, kits that I have here, I have Tableau UI Kit 2.0. Enable that, and then you can see on the left here all of the different components that you have access to instantly. And so all of this is coming directly from the UI kit that I was just in, right? So any changes that, you would make in your version of the UI kit, you would make the change, publish the change up. And then when you come back into this file that's using the same exact library, it would say, do you want to refresh, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So just for everyone's clarity, like that first page we saw, that's like the template, that's like the starting point. And from that, these components on the left are sort of generated, which means if you're in an organization, you could restyle that top layer as a UX designer, as a marketing person, whatever. And then when people come to sort of prototype their dashboards here, those things are sort of updating across the whole organization.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, nice.
And usually for large organizations, it's really important because, there's actually design system teams where their entire job is.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm not going to even get into the difference between UI kits and design systems. Just know that there's design system teams that their job is to, create the components, do the documentation, push the updates, notify people when the updates have been made, et cetera, et cetera. So I can start creating a dashboard here. And now in previous versions of the kit, I had a dashboard component that would actually let you drag an entire dashboard in, and then you could change some of the settings. I decided to get rid of that for this version 2.0 because I thought it was too limiting in people's idea of what you could do with the kit, right? So they would only think that they could use the dashboard component and they couldn't customize it anymore. So I really went back to the roots of what a UI kit is. It's separate parts of a page that you can combine together to create something. So for this example, let's say I want to create an application style Tableau dashboard. The first thing that I would probably want is I need to figure out navigation, right? So generally when I see Tableau dashboards and navigation, it's generally not done correctly. And that's my opinion, right? I often see like navigation combined with filtering, also combined with like supplemental links to different resources. So you'll see like 4 links that are evenly distributed. And one of them's like a filter. The other one's like a different navigation to a different page. And then like one's a help. And that's generally not what you want to do because there's not enough proximity between the 3 things. Like there's no distinction between the 2 actions that a person can take. So generally what you'll see in an application is something like this. So I actually probably want to do a sidebar navigation. So I'll do sidebar. It automatically pulls the sidebar navigation in. And you can see on the right-hand side here, with the new Figma features, it's made this, super easy. Now, the reason this version took me so long is because I created a bunch of new components using, the new features, but I also completely revamped all of the old components to use the new features. So I'm using
that takes time.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. So I started to add new things like component props, like using the Boolean, using the content, and using nested instances. And I'll kind of walk you through what those things mean. And so basically, in terms of like a UI kit organization, it significantly cuts down on the amount of components. I think maybe some of the people that were familiar with version like 1.5, they probably saw that one component could have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. I think one of them had like over 100 different instances. And the reason there was 120 plus different component variants is because if you wanted to hide one thing in a component, you would have to create an entire new component. But that's completely changed in the new version where you can actually just do a Boolean hide essentially, and you only have to do like one component. So I'll kind of show you what's going on here. So do I want this? What type? Do I want it to be horizontal? This is horizontal. That's vertical, which is, icon, and that's stacked together. And then there's icon only, right? So often we see in the UI kit or in the Tableau world, I see a lot of people doing this, which is like icon only, which is great. Now, one potential downside is if you're doing that Tableau wise, you need some sort of way for, you would have to do some sort of tooltip so the person understands what this is. Because when you're doing an application design, you can either there's usually like a arrow here and you can pop the sidebar out left and right,
push it out,
or there's some sort of hover action tooltip that says what it is. I like this just so you always know exactly what's going on. There's no question about what is this. And then you can say, do you want a logo? Yes or no? Sure. How many links do you want? I only want 3 links.
Yeah.
Do I want trailing links? And now this is what I'm talking about, the distinction between links, right?
The different things.
So the top 3 would be for your navigation to different dashboards, right? And so that makes sense. They're all linked together. There's good proximity. So the second would be like, do you have resources or support? Some sort of supplemental link that doesn't necessarily have any navigation to different dashboards. And that's an important distinction between those two things. I don't want trailing links. And I've also been seeing a lot of people doing, things like this. Footers, who's logged in, things like that.
So that has been a trend on Tableau Public. I noticed that actually.
Yeah. I'd say mostly they probably saw it on Dribble, and all of them have, they all have avatars, which makes sense, right? Usually you'll have some sort of avatar somewhere, whether it's in the top nav bar or on the sidebar. It's somewhere. And I think it's important. I think it's cool. We just want to make sure that we're putting it in the right location and it's designed well, essentially.
Exactly.
So let's start designing this. Now, previously in other versions, you had to like click down and get down and go all the way into it and be like, hey, all right, I want to change this. Now with this new version, you don't have to do that. You can still do this where you just click on the actual design, or you can just use all the features on the right. So for this example,
just type
let's say I want like sales. That's great. And I want it to be selected. I want it to be active, and I don't want this one to be active.
I see.
And then like claims, and then like users or something like that.
That's simple.
These icons don't really make sense. So there's a really cool new feature in Figma called instance swap. And it's basically a way to change, what's the best way of explaining it? It's usually used for icons a lot, right? So the UI kit comes with, I think it's 250 plus different icons. Each of the icons is a different component. And because of that, you can create an instance swap, which means I can just say, hey, maybe I want, there's probably $1. Yep. So you can do that, and it just swaps it out.
Nice.
And so you could just go through. And just change them to whatever you want, and it's super quick. And you don't have to like go to this place and then copy it and then like go and bring it in here and paste it and then do all this stuff.
Tell me about
That's usually what you would do, right? You would like go.
It takes forever.
You would go find
to get it right.
Yeah, you would go find the SVG somewhere, copy it, bring it over here, put it into the auto layout, and then it's a whole thing. And so you can change what your avatar looks like. So initials, icon, image. I'll keep it icon. What do I want the size to be? And I could change this to like Tim, and then Tim email or something like that. And you can change it to whatever you want. So from here, great. That's one part of our dashboard. And that's how I think about dashboards. Like whenever I see someone post something on Tableau, I think, all right, what are the distinct sections of this, right? In general, every dashboard is only a few things, right? You have some sort of navigation, right? Navigation. You have some sort of header, right? That's your like title and the things you have in the top section. Maybe you have like an info thing. And then you have your content. Content is, your charts, your KPIs, that's your content. So there's really like 3 main sections of every single dashboard. And so from here, I would want to put some sort of header. So I can Go here,
Right.
header. And these are documentation headers. Where is my header? Oh, heading. That's right. Oops.
Okay.
Heading. And so I'm not going to design everything right now, but I'm going to do this right here. So it looks pretty crazy. And so what I tried to do here is I looked through every single reference I could of every single possible thing that I've seen anyone put inside of a header, and I added it all to this. And you have the ability to take out or basically take out the things you don't want. So for this instance, we could do breadcrumbs. Like I'll keep that. I don't really want a logo. This could be profit dashboard, and it'll be like created, or maybe like last refreshed today or something. I don't know. I don't want metadata. Do I want buttons? Sure. I'll keep like a button, a secondary. And button groups are really good.
I think so.
Button groups are really good. If, for example, you wanted to, you know what, I'll keep the button group. And then do I want an information icon? No. I don't want an avatar because I already have an avatar, right? And then I don't want a divider. Great.
Nice.
So what I would do from here is start actually designing this entire square section. So I would take a frame and I would just call this like main. This is my main area. Put it right here. And then I don't do anything unless it's auto layout. So I would instantly take these two things and add them to auto layout using Shift A.
So that's for everyone's benefit, auto layout is like a capability in Figma that allows you to, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it allows you to group assets together. But then as you shift them, it keeps the positioning and relative positioning and proportionality reasonably good, right?
Yeah,
that's the simplest way.
In a super quick example, I have two things here, and you can't really do this in PowerPoint, right? I want these two things, no matter how big I make. So I'll do two of these things. I'll put it in auto layout, and now I know that there's 95 pixels between these two things. I want to change it to 24. So now I know there's 24 pixels between these two things inside of this frame. And if I make it bigger, nothing happens. But the cool thing with auto layout is you can change the constraints. So I can say, hey, I want these two things inside of this frame to fill container and fill container. So if I make the overarching and it automatically scales with it, it stays 24 pixels, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll go back to this.
I only discovered this 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah. For me, it was natural because I was already using Flex a lot, which is something
So you're looking for
coding where it's the same equivalent, right? Auto layout in Figma is just Flex in coding. So you could say, do I want it to be Flex row or Flex column? What do I want the gap to be? Which is the what you would do in code essentially. So I'm going to take this header and put it into here, and I'll make that auto layout as well. And how many pixels do I want on the left and right? I'll do 32, and I would only want sure, I'll do 32. And I'll say fill container. So I have my first thing, and now I need to start doing content, right? So I need to, well, maybe we can change some of these things. So a cool thing about the new features with Figma is something called nested instances. So this is a component, right? It's a heading component. But within that heading component, there's a lot of other components. And previously in Figma, you couldn't say, hey, show me all of the nested components that are in this and show me all the things that they can do, essentially. So what you'll notice is if I click on the heading, it's not just the heading options that you have. You also have breadcrumb as well. So you could do things like you can change the actual things inside the component. So that's a really important thing to know. And so, okay, let's start adding some dashboards. So what I would go to here is, it's called layout. Just drag layout, and it looks like nothing, right? Doesn't look like anything. You'd be like, all right, what do I do with this? So the new Figma features make this super easy. So you would choose whichever, let's say I want 2 rows or 3 rows, for example, and then you would see what's happening here, right? So you have 3 different things to replace. So, and this is using the new feature. And so there's also something called preferred instances, right? So I would say for these things, I want to swap the top one with bar chart, the second one with a Gantt chart, and the third one with a tree map, let's say, for example. And you instantly get those things in the exact, place that you were supposed to put it, essentially. And so what you could do from here is you could put it in here, and you would fill container. And so if I did this, something is probably going to break. Yep, you'll notice that it breaks, right?
It keeps the height.
But what you want to do is you want to do fill container. You want this to be fill container, and then fill container. And it's good to, if you don't know something is going to be responsive, you can just make it bigger and see what breaks. So
what happens? Yeah.
So it's important to get it responsive so that, if you get some feedback and you needed to make it larger, for example, you don't have to do any manual work, right? It's already, it's automatically done for you.
It's thought through.
Yeah, it's already done for you. So that's one way of doing it. What you could do is something like this, which I think more people should probably do it this way if they want to get really custom with their charts that they're having in here. Obviously, you could just keep it like this. And if you're like, all right, well, I just want to know what charts are in which section, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you want to see what it actually would look like, I could do maybe like, bar chart. Drag it in. I want it to be vertical. I want, do I want any of this stuff? No. Y-axis, I want 5. And I want like this to be large. And then I could just go through and, change it to whatever I want. I could change it to like, to like darker or something or other. I could do
palettes in there as well.
I'll do largest. Oops. Change back to primary 5. Primary 5, and I'll make these dark. Sure, maybe that's as custom as you want to do it.
Yeah.
And now what you could do is detach this. Let's say, I think teams have certain scenarios that they want to, let's say they want to put it into here, but this isn't a component, right? They could detach it, make it into another component, and this could be like bar chart for me, and I could call it and make it a component. And then when I go into, my content and I go to chart swap 1, I could look for bar chart for me. Where is that? Oh, these are the preferreds. If I go to all bar chart, there we go.
There you go.
And it automatically puts it in.
Wow.
So it's a slightly easier way if you want to focus on each chart at a time and you don't want to have to like keep clicking in and getting to the actual stuff. I recommend potentially just building your chart at a time and figuring out what layer you want, make it however custom as you want, and then you can just swap it in that way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. It's whatever is easiest for you, honestly. So that's a simple example.
It's a great example, and I think the one whenever I've talked about UI kits generally, in like let's say in an audience that isn't familiar with UI kit, they'll see this process, and the first thing they'll do is they'll say, "Oh, but like I could do all of this much quicker in Tableau just using Superstore, right?" And I always say, like, I think you're kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
To me, the point here is that you're almost designing the product without having to sit in front of the product. And what this allows you to do is to also then put it in front of maybe potentially an end user and have them sort of interact with it, maybe even play with it as if it's the real thing. I know that we haven't exactly looked at it here, but it is possible in Figma to add things like interactions and have, when you click on something, you go to something else, right? And those interactions are typically hard to sort of socialize until you've built the actual dashboard. And this is a much lower cost way of doing that before you actually go and get your data team to see if that interaction is possible in the first place, right?
Yep.
You can kind of test that interaction, see if it works. If it is possible, then you go and build a data pipeline to enable that interaction.
Exactly.
Which is often it happens the other way around.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's feedback and change at the design level is much less costly than it is at the engineering level. Yeah, and so I do hear people say, why am I doing it in Figma? Why don't I just do it in Tableau? And I won't disagree with the fact that for some people, and when I say some people, I mean like the top 1% to half of 1% of people are that skilled, and that skilled in Tableau, like technically on how to do like all the Tableau stuff, but also so good at design that they can also do all of that at the same time, all in Tableau. I'm not saying there's not unicorns out there, because I've seen people in the community.
But they are unicorns.
They are unicorns. Most people.
Yeah, not every organization can afford that either.
Most people aren't good enough at Tableau, or they don't have the design skills to do that all in Tableau. Right. And doing it, as a prototype, it's really great for feedback, right? You would do this, you would show it to your stakeholders, you would get feedback, you would quickly change things, and you would get sign off, right? You say, hey, this is the design, either you do it yourself, now you go in Tableau and you actually build that dashboard, or you have a different developer. If it's a really big organization, they might have designers and then developers. That's usually how it goes for web, right? Like if you're building an application, almost no companies, unless it's a startup, have people that do both. Most people are either designers or they're engineers. And I think a disadvantage that a lot of Tableau developers have is they almost have to be everything, right? They have to be designers. They have to know how to deal with, data. They have to know how to use Tableau. Most companies aren't set up where you have the distinction between designers and engineers. So I think this kit, the kit that I built, really tries to help the people that might be a little struggle with design, because I think a lot of people do struggle with design. And I mean struggle as in terms of like getting it really good, right? It's hard.
That's fair.
It takes a lot of practice to get something like really designed really well.
I think a lot of the challenge with design is that you see two approaches. One where people perceive it as adding more flair, almost like an exhibition, if that makes sense, which is kind of not typically how actually design is framed. Design is usually framed around function. So like, how can I help the user do whatever they're trying to do better? And that leads to aesthetic design, but also functional design paired with that. And that is very hard to do unless you sort of have experience at it. And actually, when you focus on that, you tend to find that leads to reductionism. Actually, it's like, what doesn't need to be here? Let's remove that and just keep it simple.
Yeah, and I think another issue that I find with the Tableau community is you don't know what you don't know. And in terms of like, you don't know what good design is until you get good design. And so
you go outside of the community to see that.
And so there are examples in the Tableau community, like, like Ludovic, is amazing. And I talk with him frequently, and he's a really great designer. I think he's definitely like one of the best in the community for sure. But also Ludovic is a unicorn, right? There's not a lot of Ludovics out there. So I think people kind of need to understand that not everything can be like top notch. I would just say try your best and try to improve on your designs one thing at a time.
Right.
And the good thing is, by creating a prototype, you can get feedback really quickly, and you're not worried about the hacks that you have to do. If you think you're struggling with design, prototyping is something that could really, really help you with your skills, because it's in a tool that is made for designers.
For design.
And so it reduces friction. So Tableau, for example, it's pretty clunky design-wise doing a lot of these things, but for Figma, it's butter. And so if you can reduce the friction at all for improving your design skills, I think that's a major plus. So, and it's not like I'm saying if you use the UI kit, you're just going to build these, the nicest dashboards of all time. But, over time, you can understand, all right, how did Robert build these components? Why did he put this thing there? Is there a specific reason? Et cetera, et cetera. And so if you ever need some, inspiration, just go to the examples and be like, all right, why did he do this, et cetera, et cetera. So
it's pretty good. So I guess probably leads me to like a question I should have asked sooner, but I think it's better to ask it now, which is like, what led you to build this? Like, at what point, there must have been an inflection point where you decided, right, like, I think this is needed out there. I know people go and want this. Let's start building.
Yeah. So it took me a while. It was kind of funny. So I mentioned it to Zach Guys, who I work with. And I kind of put it off for a while. Like, I had this idea like a couple years ago, like 2.5 to 3 years ago. And the reason I started to go down that path is my career was completely changing. Before, I was kind of in what you would imagine is what a lot of the people are in the Tableau community, which is analyst. You're an analyst. You have some data. You have stakeholders. You need to create some sort of solution for the stakeholders to have them, get to actionable insights, the whole 9 yards. But my career completely switched to product design. And so I wasn't even like using Tableau 50% of the time. It went down to like 0 to like 1 to 5%, and I was in Figma all day. And so I was getting really familiar with design systems and UI kits and, palettes and type scales and spacing scales and things like that. And I just noticed first of all, there's nothing out there like a Tableau UI kit that helps people prototype. And it also stemmed from things that happened to me previously at different jobs where I had to prototype as well, but I did it in PowerPoint. And
a bad place, actually.
Yeah. So I used to prototype in PowerPoint, and I'm like, this is a nightmare. I mean, the reason I'm saying it's a nightmare is because I had no reference. Well, I thought it wasn't that bad at the time because I had no reference to Figma. I didn't have the reference about what a good UI kit can do and what a tool like Figma could actually do. So I think sometimes when people are like, I just don't understand the difference between, PowerPoint and Figma, I really try my best to articulate the differences. But I think sometimes it is something where you're like, you just have to use it. It is just like,
you just have to try it.
Yeah. It's just another universe of tooling. Not because PowerPoint's bad. It's just not made. It's not made for that, right? It's not made for design at scale, right? And so
it's made for the office user. Who can't spend time like building components.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, it's a completely different thing.
It's a completely different thing. And so once I started using Figma and once I started using UI kits and once I kind of left the Tableau world of just, building Tableau dashboards, I was like, all right, I'm going to build a Tableau UI kit.
Right.
And it took me a while because I knew it was going to be a ton of work, and I didn't see any. I saw no reference to it really anywhere else. I was like, I don't really.
You're not seeing this
I'm
yet.
not seeing it, so I don't really have a reference of how it should be built. So it took me a while to wrap my head around. You might notice in the left-hand sidebar here, like, all right, where do you put your documentation? How do you section off like scales and things like that? You can see I have different sections, and everyone does it different, but I did it in this way. And it took me a while to understand how different companies even organize a UI kit, right? And so how are you going to show the component? Are you going to say what you want, what the component does? And so it took me a while to understand that. The first version, I think, looking back at it now, it was pretty rough. But like, I never did it before. I never created.
It's your first.
I never created a UI kit from scratch. And then, seeing version 1 to now it's kind of night and day. And so I'm actually really proud of, the way it looks now. And I put so much time into the detail about everything. And it's just cool to see the value, because, it's generally like enterprise, people are purchasing it to like practice and stuff, but it's a lot of companies. And they're like, oh, we're getting a lot of like genuine value out of this. And that's really great to hear, right? Like, it's nice to know that the time that went into it was worth it, essentially. So,
I think, in my opinion, this is the part of dashboarding that I don't think enough organizations realize they need. And you also can't really appreciate the benefit of this if you have a unicorn in your organization. Right. That kind of gets in the way, because they will do most of these things faster in the product and have it ready to go. But also, you have to be at a certain level of maturity to actually understand the workflow of getting your product, your dashboard, which I called a product by mistake there, but actually intentional, from inception all the way to delivery, and then setting up a feedback loop for that to sort of keep going. Unless you have that entire flow, something like this, you don't kind of get the most value out of it, because this enhances the speed at which you go from start to finish and then back again, basically. And you have to have that flow to really realize that. If you have this and you're just setting up your analytics team, you just started talking to your stakeholders, you probably need to get going a little bit, build a few dashboards to understand, okay, where does this process fall over, and then start to use this to help sort of solve that problem.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And I think people might think that I would always say you have to prototype in every scenario, no matter what. But one of the instances where it doesn't really make sense is exactly what you mentioned. If you're just getting Tableau, and if your company is just getting Tableau, and you don't really have a reference of, first of all, even what Tableau is that much, or how to build them, or the process that you would go from an idea of some sort of product to the end result. Something like this doesn't really make as much sense because you're just not mature enough. Obviously, you can look into it for just interest, right? But if you're not mature enough, I generally see this as I think it's a pivotal part of the process. But I'd say it's a piece that comes later. But once you start with it, you can't really go back. You can totally go back. It's just that you just see tremendous value with the design. Sometimes it's hard to quantify the benefit of a good design. And the way that I would think about quantifying a good design is, one is there's no complaints. It's absolutely seamless. Like, good design is so good because you never notice it. You always know.
You don't say anything.
You always know where to go next. You're never confused about like what you should be doing. You always understand, if I click this, it's going to change this. It's so obvious. And I just think it's something that people could really benefit from.
I think one category that I can say it makes, like, let me rephrase what I'm saying. One part of Tableau where I think it'd be stupid not to use this is embedding, because in embedding, you are essentially building a product. It just goes without saying. You're building a web platform, you're building the Chrome, you're building everything around the Tableau visualization. And it lends itself beautifully to this, because you can come in here and actually incorporate the UI kit for your embedding product alongside this to actually give people a genuine sense of what the end solution is going to look like in the platform.
Yeah.
And so I'd almost sort of say, if you're doing embedding, I don't understand why you can't look at something at all like this, because if you're taking Tableau that seriously, you're going to go and embed it in your organization, then this to me is such a small, but important part of that process.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, for example, this first one, this could be your dashboard or something, and this is what your application navigation would look like, because this is actually what an application navigation would look like, right? So this is like exactly what it could look like. So you're kind of, covering, what is it, two birds with one stone, that's the saying?
Killing two birds with one stone. That's the English.
And obviously, if you really need, obviously there's kits out there. Like, this is not a web UI kit and a Tableau UI kit, but it has a lot of like the main things you would need for application, right? So you have like avatars, badges, button groups, which are really big, buttons. You have chips, which are really big as well. Headings, layout.
But the other thing is
things like that.
The other thing is, like, whoever's building your web platform likely has something like this for the platform, and what they'll do in that Tableau space is put like some generic image from Dribbble in that space, which looks nothing like Tableau. Whereas you've got that Tableau bit done. So in my mind, I'm sort of imagining web agency turns up with their UI kit that sort of explains how the website and the platform works, and then you turn up with this Tableau UI kit, and the two kind of match made in heaven kind of come together, and the client for the first time can actually see what they're going to get before it gets built, which is like never happens.
And a quick thing on Dribbble. Not to go on a full Dribbble rant here. In the design community, Dribbble is looked at like, there's really great work on Dribbble, but it's the same thing with any social media platform. Things are, let's say Twitter, things are worded in a specific way to get the most amount of engagement. The same thing happens with Dribbble. So the things that you generally see as most popular, right, which I see a lot in the Tableau community, they'll like kind of take whatever they see on Dribbble and then try to do in a Tableau dashboard. Those are not real applications that people design in real life. There's like a ton of like skeuomorphism and like crazy effects that you would not see in a real application. So what I would say is there's really great designers that are putting stuff on Dribbble that are basically building in public. That's kind of what they call it. They're building in public. They're building some sort of product, and they're showing you the process along the way. So if you can find those people that are creating a real product and they're showing you real screenshots of real things they're going to implement, that would help you a lot more than just looking at the trending page of Dribbble. Because they're crazy designs, and no one is actually there's actually a common like meme that you'll see around. It's like the designer designing the thing, and then it's like the engineer, which is just like completely bummed out that they have to like engineer this crazy design that makes no sense.
No sense.
And so just be careful with that.
It's good advice. It's good advice. I fall guilty of opening up a Chrome tab and Googling something to get like a bunch of images just so I can sample like what I think it should look like. and I'll just sort of do a quick scan of that, and then I'll try and sort of replicate something in my head. But actually, you're right. Like, the context is so important. The context, especially if you want something that works, that is so important. So
yeah, generally, I mean, everyone has different tastes, right? My general taste is, which is why, you know, I love Apple so much, and I love the Arc browser, like we were talking about earlier. I love these opinionated designs on things that are easy to use, just work, and they're just clean, super clean. I love clean. I know some people don't. Some people kind of love. They like the color. They like not. They don't like flat design. You know, they like other stuff. That's their taste. But I just love clean, realistic designs, essentially. So,
and I think everyone should have an opinion on that. Like, that's what Rob likes. I'm a real fan of, like, there's a current trend in design where things look like they're all made of glass. Like, I don't know why, but that kind of
the glass morphism, like that frosted,
glass morphism,
that frosted look. Yeah, it looks super cool.
There's so many different tastes, but you'd have to have an opinion, and as long as you can stand behind it, and key thing here, you understand what makes that design work, then like, run with it, make it work in whatever context you want it to work. But if you want people to use your product, dare I say it, your opinion doesn't matter, right? You've actually got to build for people, and they might not go with that flow. And actually, sometimes the right thing to do is to put your sort of design sense to one side and try and say, like, what will these people accept? What will they adopt, right? Because those are the two things that have to work in an enterprise context as well.
Exactly. And that's what the prototypes are great for. And like you mentioned earlier about, you know, using the prototype feature I have in the top right here. What I like to do, you know, with our application design is, you know, you have the prototype, and then you have functionality. You give them the prototype and say, hey, ask them specific questions. Like, if you're going to do this, where would you go? And you kind of give them prompts, and you watch their mouse about, like, where are they going? What are they clicking? Clearly you said this one thing and they're going to this different section, so something must be off. And so it's really great for that as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been super valuable. I am long overdue a purchase of this UI kit, so I'll definitely be purchasing it myself and using it. I think there is I would love at some point to do a video on, like, I'm going to design a dashboard from start to finish, but I'm going to do it in, like, an opinionated way, right? And I'm going to prototype it. We're going to come up with the data, the story, everything. And it might be like a 6-hour stream, but just want to give people sort of a view into that kind of process. Because I think until you see the whole process in the most ideal way, you can't really critique sort of different parts and see what works for you and see what you can try, but also get some hints as to, here's how to do it. Like, it's not as complicated as it looks a lot of the time. It's just requires you to get into it.
I love that idea because, you know, I've done sessions like this where I'm kind of showing it off. I'm also like, you know, explaining what it is and just like the general concept of a UI kit. And I'm showing how to build a dashboard, but I've never like I've never done a video taking the full kit and saying, all right, I'm going to build a great looking dashboard from start to finish. Usually I stop at the chart where I never actually show how I style the entire chart. So it would be interesting to just do a full build of some sort of. And I don't want it to make it seem like you can build literally anything you can possibly think of using the Tableau UI kit. I think that's an issue some people run into with, like, they're like, oh, I'm trying to do this one specific thing, but it's such a niche thing that they're trying to do. Like, I can't build for every scenario that someone's going to have. So I think it would be good. It would be good to show, like, hey, I have this one use case for this dashboard, and I need to do this custom thing. How would I do this custom thing and add it into this dashboard? And how would I use the two together? And, like, doing custom
exactly.
and the kit together. Because most people that are doing websites, unless they want their website to look like all the other websites, they're going to take the UI kit and customize it to the way that they want for a truly new experience, not just like boilerplate. So
true. 100%.
So that'd be interesting. So
be good fun. I'll let you know when I do that. I'm trying to do more live streams, so that's something that it's breaking the ice. I don't have the stamina of these Twitch streamers who can go on like for 8 hours at a time. I just like, wow. I did it once and I was like, right,
I don't understand.
I'm gonna need to do this for a long time before I get to that level.
It's too much. It's crazy. They do it all day. I mean, but it is their job.
Every day, 5 days a week. Right? It's their living.
Like they literally make. Well, some of them make a ton of money. Some of them not so much. But
But I think there's a portion of content that could really be sort of opened up with live streams, because too much you get the polished view of like, here's a 10-minute video, 15-minute video, I'm going to build this dashboard, the end solution is there. The thing that I think people value a lot is like vanilla to the end, right? Like just start from nothing. Let's see your process. People, I think 3 or 4 of those would really go a long way in helping people sort of understand the Tableau world better.
Yeah.
You know, from nothing to server, from nothing to, Tableau cloud, from, from prototype to Tableau embedding, those are sort of like a few of the top things I want to do. Tableau server installs is the classic one that everyone asks for, but no one will watch, as a YouTube stats say.
Yeah. Those have always been my favorite videos to watch, where, you get a lot of people of, they're doing, I mostly at this point only follow, like design people on Twitter, and a lot of my favorite content is like a long form, like how do I actually, like straight up, how do I design? I'm stuck in this portion. What's my mindset? How do I continue? What are my strategies? And so usually you just see the end result and you have no idea all of the like insanely small decisions that go into getting to that final product. So there's definitely, not everyone's going to watch it, right? Like, because it is like longer and not everyone loves that, but it's, in my opinion, the most valuable in terms of like concrete learning, in my opinion, for design 100%. Specifically for me.